Hi, welcome once again to this channel, Excel in Excel, the learning channel. So in this video, we'll talk about the range names. What are range names? When do we use it? Rather, when we prefer it? And are there times when we really don't want to use them? So let's get on with that. So let's take a example. Let's take a data sheet in Excel and try to understand how there are different ways in which we can name the ranges. And of course, the different ways in which we can use them. Let's consider this data. Now let's assume that this is the data of a particular organization which has offices in different cities of India, and this is their sales, maybe in lakhs. So this is the sales that they have for each month, as you can see, January to December, for each of the offices that they have. And this is for 2019, 20, 21 and 22. So we have different sheets here. So we have 4 years of sales for all the 12 months of each of those 4 years. So now, if I need to figure out what is the sale of January in, let's say, first 5 or 6 cities here, then of course, I can take a range like this and type in some B2 to B8. So therefore, in this case, what is happening is we'll get the sum of all this. However, we can also name it as a range. Now we have now B2 to B8, what we have used is a range, and that's a range address. We have used an address, but we can also use a range name. Now for doing that, what we'll do is, once we have selected this particular region, right? Because this region is already selected, B2 to B8, assuming that B2 to B8 is already selected, what we're going to do is, we're going to type a range name at this point. As of now, it is showing M1 because M1 was the selected cell before when I took the screenshot here. But assuming that B2 to B8 is selected, I would type in a name here. Let's say Jan. So I physically type in JN here, and then once I press an enter, this region, that is B2 to B8, gets a name Jan, and therefore now I can rewrite my sum as sum of Jan. Note, please don't put a quotation mark here, because Jan with quotation mark is a string, while Jan as it is a range name which we had defined just now here. One interesting thing about range name also is that typically when you give the range addresses, by default they are relative address. That means until and unless you put dollars before them and make them absolute, they are relative addresses. So the default behavior of range addresses is relative addresses, while the default behavior of a range name is an absolute address. So we'll never have a scenario where we'll put a dollar before Jan. So we'll just say sum of Jan. The disadvantage I might say on this is that if I had written the first formula, the blue one, sum B2 to B8, I could have dragged the formula. Once I select on the formula, this B2 to B8, I could have dragged it here. Then because it's a relative address, or I could have copied the formula in the next cell. Because this is a relative address, the B2 to B8 would possibly become C2 to C8. However, this sum of Jan, even if I copy another cell, it will always remain sum of Jan, and therefore it will return me the sum of B2 to B8. That's an absolute address. So let me take you to Excel and show you what I just talked about. So what we'll do now is, we will maybe give a formula for sum, and then we'll select this range. So we're selecting B2 to B29. So I have B2 to B29, sum of B2 to B29, and I get the result as 5853, a simple sum function. Alternately, let me select this again, B2 to B29, and this time let me go here and type in Jan. Okay, I typed in Jan there, and now I press an enter, and as you can see, this area, when I select, it is written Jan. So for example, if I select this area, I only get the address of the first cell, but or rather address of the active cell. So here also, in Jan also, if I select a shorter thing, it again gives me the address of the active cell, the one which is with a lighter color. But if I select this whole thing, if I now select this B2 to B29, as you can see, this has become Jan. And therefore now here I can use Jan. As you can see, as I started typing JA, Jan has already come in. It was giving me a prompt. And therefore, now here it is. So as you can see, the formula, it is sum of Jan. And of course, naturally, I'll get the same answer. Now let's do one thing. Let's copy this formula here. Now notice here, while this has changed, because the formula here has changed from C2 to C29, because of the relative addresses, C2 to C29, and of course the value has become 5218. However, in this row, it always remained 5253, because anywhere you look at the formula is sum of Jan, and Jan is addressing B2 to B29. So that's typically how we use the range names. So if you want, why do you use a range name? We use a range name if, for example, we are addressing one particular range. For example, this Jan, we are addressing this again and again. We need these values again and again, and maybe at different locations. So if I am making a model, an Excel model, which has many sheets, and I want to address something from maybe another sheet, then and I have to do it repeatedly, then every time going back to that sheet, selecting that area, and then getting those addresses kind of becomes a little cumbersome. So if we are calling a particular range from different location every time, then it makes sense to actually give a range name. On the other hand, if this was our idea, that we would write the formula and copy it around, then giving a range name is not worth it. So because, as you can see, it is absolute. So therefore, there are times when we would like to have range names, and there are times when we do not want to have the range names. Sometimes what happens is, we want to name multiple ranges. Now if we want to name multiple ranges, depending on how we organize the data. Now as you can see the data, it's organized in such a way that the column names are Jan, Feb, March, April, and so on and so forth. And while the row names are Amravati, Itanagar, Dispur, Patna, Raipur, and so on and so forth. Now in this case, if I want to take this entire area and I want to make multiple ranges, that means instead of selecting one, typing in JN, selecting another one, typing in FEB, selecting another range, typing in MAR, which is a cumbersome process, we can make this process a little easier for us, given that they are organized in a two-dimensional table. So for that, what we will do is, once we will select this, then we will go into the formula tab and select create from selection. So once again, we select this range. After selecting this range, that is selecting this table, we will go into the formula tab and then click on create from selection. Now if we do that, what would happen as a result is, because this was our selection, this range will be named Jan. Why? Because the first cell, that means in this column, the first cell had Jan. So from the cell number 2 till whatever was our selection, that gets renamed as Jan. Similarly, this gets renamed as Feb. So because the column heading was Feb, and so from second cell of that column, the selection, till the end of the selection, that gets named as Feb. Similarly, this might get named as August. So Jan, Feb, March, April. So we had got 12 ranges created like this. And in the similar way, because we also had the row names, the first cell of the row, we have the name. So this particular cell gets the name Dispur, and similarly this particular range gets the name Raipur. Sorry, I made a mistake here, it should be Raipur. Therefore, what happens is, this B2 to M2 will get the name Amaravati, B3 to M3 will get the name Itanagar, and so on and so forth. So therefore, when you want to name multiple range at same point of time, you can do so, provided you have arranged your data accordingly. So once again, as usual, let's do it in Excel. So let's look into Excel, and try to do that job. So what are you going to do now is, let's take this cell again, and now let me select this. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting this whole thing, right? So I've selected this whole range, and then as I said, I'll go into the formula ribbon, and then here is the create from selection. Now once I click on this create from selection, it pops up this dialog box and asks create names in top row and left column. That means the top row names and the left column names will be considered for the ranges. If there were names also in this part, that means in the last column also I had non-numbers, but I had names. In that case, possibly it would have also selected right column, or if I had the names at the end, then maybe bottom row also. So you can select this, but most of the time by default Excel is intelligent enough to select the right thing. So top row and left column, now it's done. Okay, it will replace if there is any existing thing. Go ahead. Now you see, if I select this area, you see the range name has come Amravati. Similarly, if I select this, the range name has come Gandhinagar. And similarly, if I had selected this, then as you can see, range name is April. So therefore, now here I can write a formula like equal to sum of, let's say Shillong. So as you can see, as I am typing, Shillong has come in. So there, sum of Shillong, and that's the sum I'm going to get. So that's all for this episode. Here we basically saw how we create the range names, how to use the range names, what may be the limitations of using a range name, and what can be the advantages of using them. So thank you for your time. Keep learning till we meet again.